So, the title of this explainer is Lovecraft's Wife. And, that name alone kind of puts a woman in the shadow of a famous man, right? But we're going to flip that narrative. What if the real story here isn't about her being his wife, but about him being, just for a little while, her husband? We're going to start with her words, because this is her story. That's a quote from Sonia Greene, talking about the first time she met the master of weird fiction himself, H.P. Lovecraft. It's so candid, so sharp, and it tells you right away she was not just some quiet admirer. She absolutely had a mind of her own. And that's really the big question, isn't it? We all know Lovecraft, the reclusive horror guy from Providence. But who was this woman? The woman who was, in so many ways, his complete opposite. The one who saw all of his glaring flaws and still tried to help him, who funded his writing, and who, for a very short, very chaotic time, was his partner in life. Okay, so to really understand Sonia, we have to forget Lovecraft for a minute, seriously. We have to go back and see the full, incredible life she lived long before he was ever in the picture. This is not a chapter in his biography. This is the story of a woman who was already the main character in her own life. Her story starts way back in 1883 in what is now Ukraine. She was born Sonia Haft-Shafkin into a Jewish family, and her early life was just one upheaval after another. After her dad died, her mom moved to the United States, but had to leave Sonia and her brother behind in a school in Liverpool. They were finally able to join her in America in 1892. Right from the very beginning, this was a journey of resilience. And when she got to America, she didn't just get by, she thrived. Sonia became a successful milliner. That's a designer and seller of hats. And you have to remember, this was a time when very few women had any financial independence at all. She built a solid middle-class life for herself, all on her own, a truly self-made professional. But she was more than just a great businesswoman. She had this deep passion for literature and ideas, which led her to the world of amateur journalism. You can kind of think of it as the original fanzine culture of the early 20th century. And in that world, she wasn't just some participant. She was a leader. She was a patron who bankrolled several publications, and she was an active writer and editor herself. And she did all of this while navigating a really complex personal life. Her first marriage was apparently pretty turbulent, and it ended when her husband died in 1916. That left her to raise her daughter, Florence, completely on her own. So let's just recap. A businesswoman, a publisher, a patron, and a single mother. That was Sonia Greene. So it was in that world, that amateurdom, as they called it, that her path finally crossed with H.P. Lovecraft. And here's something you really gotta understand. They didn't meet as some fan and a famous writer. Nope, they met as peers. Look at her credentials in this community. They were seriously impressive. She was elected president of the United Amateur Press Association. She published her own high-quality journal called The Rainbow, and she acted as a financial backer for other writers. The point is, when she met Lovecraft in 1921, she was already a big deal in their shared world. And this table, wow, it just lays it all out, doesn't it? It shows just how completely unlikely their pairing was. On one side, you have Sonia, a worldly, successful Jewish immigrant businesswoman from New York, and on the other, H.P. Lovecraft, a reclusive, financially dependent writer who clung to his old New England family history and had these deeply nativist, racist, and anti-Semitic views. They were total polar opposites. And Sonia knew it. She saw his prejudices firsthand. This quote is just remarkable. It shows that instead of being put off by it, she actually took it upon herself to try and change him. She really believed that if she could just expose him to cultured Jewish people like herself and their mutual friend Samuel Loveman, it might challenge his bigoted worldview. She wasn't just passively attracted to him, she was actively trying to educate him. So, against all odds, this unlikely courtship actually leads to marriage on March 3rd, 1924. Lovecraft leaves the only place he's ever really known, Providence, and moves into Sonia's apartment in Brooklyn. This was supposed to be a brand new beginning for both of them, their New York story. And right away, the dynamic in their marriage was, it was the complete opposite of what you'd expect back then. Sonia was the primary breadwinner. She used her savings and her income to support Lovecraft so he could focus on his writing. The whole plan was that New York, the publishing capital of the world, would launch his career. But Lovecraft, a guy who had never held a real job in his life, just couldn't adapt.
As his job searches failed again and again, his hatred for the diverse, bustling city just got more and more intense.
And the dream, man, it just unraveled with stunning speed. Within just a few months, financial disaster strikes when Sonia's business fails. Her own health started to suffer. By 1925, she had to take a job out of state, leaving Lovecraft all alone in a city he absolutely detested. And by April of 1926, he just gave up and retreated back to the familiar comfort of Providence. Their shared life was over.
So in the end, after all that hope, all that dramatic upheaval, how long did they actually live together as husband and wife? Just 15 months. That's it. Barely more than a year before it all fell apart for good.
But like we said, Sonia's story didn't begin with Lovecraft, and it sure as heck didn't end with him. After they separated, she had to rebuild her life all over again, and eventually she fought to tell her own story on her own terms. She moved clear across the country to California in 1933 and found happiness again, marrying a Dr. Nathaniel Davis in 1936. Then things get weird. She didn't even find out Lovecraft had died until 1945, a full 8 years after it happened. But an even bigger shock was waiting for her. She found out that Lovecraft had never actually signed the final divorce papers, which meant her new marriage was technically bigamous, a revelation that really deeply disturbed her later in life. As Lovecraft's fame started to grow after his death, Sonia found herself in a totally new battle, a fight for her own history. And you can just feel her indignation in this letter to Lovecraft's publisher. The literary estate was trying to control her memories, her letters, her story, but Sonia was not about to be silenced.
So what does she do? She starts to write. In the late 1940s, she wrote her memoir. A heavily edited, kind of watered-down version appeared in a newspaper in 1948, but it wasn't the full story. It actually took decades, long after she passed away in 1972, for researchers to piece together all her papers and finally publish her complete, unedited life story in her own words.
And this recent commentary just says it all perfectly. For so long, she was a footnote, right? A brief and shadowy chapter. But with her own writings finally brought to light, she is where she belongs, the star of her own remarkable story. An immigrant, a businesswoman, a single mother, a publisher, a patron, and above all, a survivor. It's just such a powerful reminder that history is often so incomplete. Sonia Greene's full story was nearly erased, just pushed aside to be Lovecraft's wife. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other complex, fascinating lives are just hidden there in the shadows of famous names, waiting for someone to look a little closer and tell their story.